Okay, Squat Senior back on the cam installation problems with the Super M. As you've seen on my last video, I had some issues installing the center cam bearing. You noticed it had a little bit of scraping going on the rear cam bearing also. Anyway, some very good comments in the comment section about what I did wrong, which I'm going to explain some of the things that I definitely did wrong. So thanks, guys. I appreciate the comments. Helps me learn. Hopefully I'll do what I explain here helps you learn. So anyway, let's get into this. I picked this set up at a swap meet, which came actually with no instructions. That was one of the comments, is did I follow the instructions from how to operate this thing? Well, I had no instructions with it, and figuring, just visually I should be able to figure this out. It looks like a no-brainer, but actually a little bit more to this thing than looks like. So anyway, this is an older style set, which has O-rings to hold the expander together. As you can see in the instruction sheet, the newer style comes with a rubber sleeve, which is supposed to expand and stuff like that. Okay, one of the first things I did is when I installed this expander inside the sleeve inside the expander, is you'll notice how the lines all line up on these pieces here. Well, I didn't do that. I figured I split it by about 1/8 of a turn. I put them here. Totally wrong. Okay, the next thing is there is on page 2 of the instruction sheet, you'll see bearing size ID with the expander to use on it. Well, on this Super M, the front bearing and the center bearing basically could use 2 different expanders. This one is to the maximum of expansion. Looks fairly loose to me. I get into this one and it's virtually to size. So anyway, this is the one I used, which I probably would have done that, seeing how there's only a few thousandths difference between the maximum and the minimum here. I went with this one. I didn't have the instructions, but I would have probably done the same anyway after I even had the instructions, noting the size of the ID of the bearing. Okay, so I figured I did use the right size expander. Another thing I did not do is the driving washer. What the driving washer does, it goes on to the end of the expander stud, and as you can see, it will drive onto the expander pieces here. Well, what I did is I just screwed the bar onto the expander, and as you can see, it will only hit these sleeves right here, which after I got the instructions, read through them, understand what's going on, very possible what that did hitting this, it expanded these out farther, and that's what caused my mushroom on that center bearing there. So anyway, that's another thing that I did wrong. Another thing is some guy says use a bigger hammer. Well, I figured I had a pretty good size. There's a 2-pound hammer I used to do this. So I don't know, they says hit it harder and faster. I figured from my past experiences that should work good. And also, when it comes to hammering on a bearing, I have some pretty serious reservations about doing that anyway. Apparently it works. That's the recommended procedure for this, but I still have my reservations for that. Another good one was to heat the block and cool the bearings. I used to do a lot of work on snowmobile engines, basically the Rotax single cylinders where this would come in. They have a pressed fit on the roller bearings from the crankcase to the case, and what I would do is I'd take a propane torch and I'd do about 10 revolutions outside the case where the bearing goes. You tip that up, hit the crank on a block of wood, pops right out of the case. No hammer and beating or anything like that. And according to service schools, you think beating a crankshaft on a block of wood is not good, but that was according to service school, a procedure to do it, and it did work good. You didn't have to hit it that hard. Cool the bearings. That's another thing a person could do. And there shouldn't be no problem here because in the next few days and stuff, we're going to have below zero. So instead of sticking them in a freezer or refrigerator, I'll just set them outside. I got a small propane torch. I'll probably heat the block and see what happens in that. Another thing, you notice some scraping when I installed the back one. Sharp edge on the block. You'll notice some scraping, a few fine particles come out here. Another good comment is the block should be tapered a little bit for the bearing to slide in. And the bearings too have a taper built into them. So anyway, that was some of the issues that I had and what I did wrong and probably would not do in the future, but I'm not sure if I'll be using this set for installing anymore, but it does work good for removing the bearings. Another thing I noticed too is you'll notice on this one, see, and I think I'm not sure if this set was well used, abused, or a little bit of both, which I assume it's a little bit of both. But you'll see a little bit of, you can hook it with your finger where it's mushroomed out on the driver, on the expander here. We got some here's one pretty heavy, here's another one real heavy, and you can see how the fingernail. Well, that could bind you up on the board of block too. I had noticed that on the other one, and you can see through the video I had dressed that up with a file and made it smooth. So this here apparently has been a pretty well-used piece of equipment. Anyway, I'll kind of go up next with what I hopefully will be a cure to my problems. Okay, here I'm hoping this is going to be a solution to my problem. I've got a video up about machining out some pieces and stuff here. And the plan is I'm going to draw these in instead of hammering them in. What I did is I made a couple sleeves here. The bearings will slide over like that. I made guide bushings that will go to the machine surfaces of the block. I've got two different lengths of driving bars, assortment of nuts, assortment of flat washers, stuff like that. Anyway, what you would do to install a center bearing, I would probably use the shorter shaft. What I would do is install this guide sleeve on first. This would go in the block. You would install the bearing on the sleeve. We'll get the right bearing on the sleeve here. There we go. You would put this in like that. Get it lined up with the bore. I'd probably put a washer in the back. You'd put a nut on the back. Get everything lined up in bore. You would hold this nut on the back side so you would not be doing a spin action on here, and you would turn on the double nutted end here. Anyway, that's the plan. Hopefully this will work out. I've got, like I say, two different sizes of bars or threaded rod here. What I'll do for the center bearings, I can probably just do the front one and the center one. This will be my alignment piece, and just draw this right in. For the front one, I'll probably have to use the longer one so I can go all the way through the block. I'll show you how these driving guide sleeves work and explain why I would go all the way through. Okay, here's the setup for installing these cam bearings I'll be using. As you can see, I have two different lengths of drawbars, a short one, which would probably be used just between two bearing bores, and a longer one, which you could go through the whole block. It all depends how what's needed to install these bearings and stuff to get them in the right position, keep them in a line. I've got two alignment bushings made up, one for the front, one for the back. They're two different sizes, and what they do, you will see I have a step machined into it, and I've got that so when you slide it into the block bore, it will keep the drawbar centered. So when you pull the bearing in, it'll all come in square. So to use this setup, what I'm going to probably do is install the center cam bearing first. I'll put the alignment bushing onto the end of the shorter drawbar. I'll line that up, put it in the block. Next thing I'll do is I'll put the bearing on the installation tool. Installation tool will go onto the end of here with a washer and a nut, and then everything lined up, everything finger tight, everything should be in alignment all the way through, and start just taking wrenches and pulling that bearing in. Again, like I say, when it comes to hammering on bearings, I've got some pretty good reservations on doing that. So anyway, like I say, I've got 2 alignment bushings. The back one, you can see I got it machined the same. It's got a step on it. It will go down in here, and I've got this one set up just to the right size where the expansion plug goes in. Anyway, hopefully this is a cure to my problem. Well, hopefully it is. I can see where it can't be any worse than what I've been through already. So anyway, that's the procedure. Next thing we'll probably be doing is installing the bushings and getting the cam fit. Stay tuned.